Commander Zilf stood on the bridge of the Harmonious, understanding, and watched the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. Earth, the humans called it. The third planet from a yellow star, covered in water and clouds and green land masses. It looked peaceful enough, but Zilf had read the reports. He knew what lived down there. The preliminary scans had been disturbing. Humans were persistent hunters. They chased their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion and gave up trying to live. What kind of species did that? Most predators on most worlds attacked quickly or gave up. Humans just kept coming. They never stopped. Worse, they had domesticated wolves. Actual wolves. Apex predators with teeth designed for tearing flesh. Humans had taken these dangerous creatures into their homes and made them into pets. The scan showed millions of these dogs living with human families, sleeping in beds with human children. Zilf's scales had gone cold when he read that part, but the Galactic Confederacy believed in giving every species a chance. They had integrated 847 different species into their peaceful alliance. Surely they could handle one more, even if that species was a bit unusual. The landing went smoothly. The humans had prepared a greeting area in a place called Geneva. Thousands of humans gathered to watch, all of them making noise and waving their appendages. Zilf found their enthusiasm unsettling, but he painted his scales in friendly colors and descended the ramp with his diplomatic team. The human leaders were polite. They spoke through translation devices and offered food. Zilf tried not to show his horror when he learned that humans ate both plants and animals. Omnivores were rare in the galaxy. Most species evolved to eat one or the other. Humans ate everything. Their bodies could process almost any organic matter. They even consumed toxins for pleasure, things they called alcohol and coffee and spicy food that would kill most other beings. Still, the first week went well. Humans were curious and asked many questions. They wanted to know about other species, about space travel, about the Confederacy. They seemed genuinely interested in joining the galactic community. Zilf started to relax. Maybe the reports had been exaggerated. Maybe humans were not as dangerous as the scan suggested. Then the incident happened. It was the 8th day of contact. Zilf had invited a small group of humans onto the ship for a tour. Among them was a family with a young child, a small female human no more than 4 cycles old. The child was excited, running ahead of her parents, looking at everything with wide eyes. The ship's plasma coolant system was visible through transparent aluminum panels in one corridor. It was perfectly safe. The panels were designed to withstand impact from small meteorites. But the human child was curious and energetic, and she climbed onto an equipment cart that someone had left in the hallway. The cart tipped. The child fell, and somehow, impossibly, she struck the panel at exactly the right angle with exactly enough force. The panel cracked. The child tumbled through and fell into the plasma coolant reservoir. Zilf's 3 hearts stopped. Plasma coolant was superheated to 400 degrees. Nothing survived contact with it. The child would be dead in seconds. Her body dissolved. It was a tragedy, a horrible accident, but there was nothing anyone could do. Except the human parents did not accept this. The mother screamed and jumped into the reservoir after her child. Just jumped, without hesitation, into liquid that was hot enough to melt flesh from bone. The father went in half a second later. Zilf's crew stood frozen in shock as the 2 adult humans thrashed in the coolant, searching desperately for their offspring. The emergency systems activated. The coolant began to drain. Within 20 seconds, the reservoir was empty, and the 3 humans lay on the metal floor, their skin red and blistered, their bodies steaming. Medical teams rushed forward. Zilf could not move. He had just watched 2 adults deliberately immolate themselves for a child who was surely already dead. but the child was not dead. She was screaming, her voice high and awful, but she was alive. The parents were conscious too, both of them reaching for their daughter, even as their burned hands left skin on the metal floor. The medical team loaded all three humans onto stretchers and rushed them to the medical bay. Zilf followed, unable to believe what he was seeing. His ship's doctor, a Vrenlix named Sarth, was already scanning the humans with trembling tentacles. "They should be dead," Sarth whispered. "The temperature, the exposure time, the damage to their tissue. They should be dead, but they are not," Zilf said. "No, their bodies release something, a chemical called adrenaline. It is blocking their pain receptors and increasing their cardiovascular function. They are operating on pure survival instinct. Commander, their bodies are fighting death itself." Over the next few hours, Zilf watched the human medical team work. They had brought their own doctors to the ship, and these doctors performed procedures that made Zilf's scales itch. They cut away dead tissue. They grafted new skin. They injected chemicals and used machines to keep the bodies functioning while they healed in any other species. Such injuries would be fatal. The Confederacy's philosophy was to accept death when it came, to not fight the natural order. But humans did not accept this. They fought. They cut and stitched and forced their bodies to regenerate. It took weeks, but all three humans survived. The child's skin grew back smooth and unmarked. The parents bore scars, but they were alive and functional. Zilf visited them before they left the ship. The mother was holding her child, both of them healthy, both of them smiling at him. The father shook Zilf's claw in the human gesture of friendship. "Thank you for your medical bay," the father said. "And please don't feel bad about what happened. Accidents happen. We're just grateful everyone is okay." Zilf did not know what to say. These humans had nearly died. They had suffered agony. They had scars they would carry forever. And they were grateful. They were smiling. They bore no anger, no resentment. After they left, Zilf returned to his quarters and opened his personal log. He needed to record what he had learned. His claws trembled as he typed. "Humans do not accept death," he wrote. "Even when death has already claimed them, they fight. They ignore pain that would drive other species mad. They sacrifice themselves for their young without thought or hesitation. And when they survive, they are grateful rather than traumatized. I do not know if we should welcome such creatures into the Confederacy. I do not know if the galaxy is ready for a species that treats impossible survival as merely inconvenient." He saved the log and looked out at Earth through his window. Down there were billions of these creatures, all of them with this same strange refusal to accept limitations, all of them capable of jumping into plasma to save their children. Zilf's scales went cold again. But this time, it was not from reading reports. This time, he had seen the truth with his own eyes. And he finally understood why the preliminary scans had marked humanity as potentially dangerous. They were not dangerous because they were violent. They were dangerous because they did not know when to stop. 6 months after first contact, humanity joined the Galactic Confederacy. There was a ceremony on Earth with speeches and celebrations. Representatives from 100 species came to welcome the humans. Everyone smiled and made polite conversation, though Kreeth noticed that most species kept their distance. They had all read the reports about the plasma coolant incident. Kreeth was a station administrator on Nexus Prime, one of the largest trading hubs in Confederacy space. Her job was to manage the thousands of beings who lived and worked on the station. It was usually boring work. She processed housing applications, resolved minor disputes, and made sure everyone followed station regulations. She had been doing it for 15 cycles and was good at it. Then the humans arrived, and boring became a distant memory. The first human to request quarters was a miner named Jakob. He wanted a HAB unit on the lower levels. in the section where the station's night cycle meant complete darkness for 8 hours. Creeth looked at the application 3 times to make sure she was reading it correctly. This section has no ambient lighting during night cycle, she told Jakob through the translation device. Most species require constant light for psychological health. Are you certain this is where you want to live? Jakob smiled. Humans did that a lot, showing their teeth. Creeth still found it unsettling. Yeah, that's fine. I grew up in Norway. We had darkness 6 months of the year. This is nothing. But this is complete darkness. 0 visibility. You will not be able to see. I have a flashlight, Jakob said, as if that explained everything. Creeth approved the application because she had no valid reason to deny it. But she made a note in her log. Humans could tolerate darkness that would drive other species insane. The notes in her log multiplied quickly after that. 2 weeks later, there was a toxic gas leak in the mining sector. It was not immediately fatal, but exposure for more than 10 minutes would cause permanent lung damage. Creeth initiated evacuation protocols. Every species evacuated within 5 minutes. Except the humans. She called Jakob on the communication system. The mining sector is toxic. You must evacuate immediately. I know, Jakob said. His voice sounded strange through his breathing mask. But we're almost done with this section. Just need another 20 minutes. You will suffer permanent damage if you stay. Yeah, probably. But if we don't finish this seam, the whole excavation schedule gets pushed back 3 weeks. That costs the station a lot of money. We'll be fine. We've got masks. They stayed. All 12 human miners stayed in toxic air for 45 minutes until they finished their work. When they finally came out, Station Medical had to treat them all for chemical burns in their lungs. Creeth visited them in the medical bay, trying to understand. Why did you risk your health for a work schedule? She asked Jakob. He seemed confused by the question. Because it needed to be done. The station depends on that ore shipment. We couldn't just leave the job half-finished. But you were literally dying. We weren't dying, Jakob said. We were just getting hurt. That's different. Creeth did not understand the distinction, but she added another note to her log. Humans did not evacuate during emergencies if they felt their task was important. They would accept injury to complete their work. The incident that truly frightened her came a month later. A distress call came from a Zelthian pleasure yacht. Pirates had hijacked the ship and were taking the passengers to be sold as slaves. The yacht had 43 beings on board, including younglings. The Confederacy's rapid response fleet was 3 days away. There was a human cargo hauler 4 hours away. The ship was called Determination, which Creeth had learned was a very human name. Its captain was a woman named Sarah Chun. Creeth sent the distress call to all nearby vessels as protocol required, but she did not expect the cargo hauler to respond. Civilian ships were not supposed to engage with pirates. It was too dangerous. Sarah Chun responded immediately. We're the closest ship. We're going to help. Captain Chun, you are a cargo vessel. You have no weapons. Please wait for the military fleet. Those people don't have 3 days. We're going now. Creeth watched on the long-range sensors as the human ship changed course and accelerated toward the pirate vessel. She felt her breathing sacs constrict with anxiety. This was suicide. The pirates were armed. They would destroy the cargo hauler or take it as a second prize. But the Determination did not try to fight the pirate ship in space. Instead, it matched velocity and docked with the yacht. The humans were boarding. They were going inside a ship full of armed pirates with nothing but a cargo hauler crew. Creeth pulled up the yacht's internal sensors. Confederacy law required all passenger vessels to have internal security cameras. She watched the feeds with growing horror. There were 6 humans. They wore cargo-loading exoskeletons that they had modified with welding torches and hydraulic clamps. They moved through the ship in a coordinated pattern that looked practiced, almost choreographed. When they encountered pirates, they did not hesitate. They did not negotiate. They simply acted. One pirate aimed a plasma rifle at a human. The human ducked, closed the distance in 2 long strides, and used his exoskeleton's hydraulic arm to crush the rifle into scrap metal. Another human used a welding torch to seal a corridor door, trapping 3 pirates in a dead end. A third human, a small female, climbed through the ventilation system and dropped onto a pirate from above, using her exoskeleton's weight to pin him to the floor. It took them 80 minutes to secure the entire ship. All 43 hostages were recovered unharmed. All 8 pirates were captured alive, bound with cargo straps, and left in the ship's hold. The military fleet arrived 3 days later and found everything already resolved. Captain Chun's report was 3 sentences long. Received distress call. Rendered assistance. Returning to our scheduled route. Creether requested a meeting with Captain Chun when the Determination docked at Nexus Prime for refueling. She needed to understand what she had witnessed. Sarah Chun was younger than Creeth expected, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and eyes that seemed to notice everything. She accepted Creeth's invitation for tea in the station administrator's office. Captain Chun, Creeth began carefully. Your actions during the pirate incident were extraordinary. You saved many lives. Sarah shrugged. We were the closest ship. Someone had to help. But you are civilians. You had no weapons. You used cargo equipment to fight armed pirates. Well, yeah. We used what we had. The exoskeletons can lift 5 tons. They work fine for restraining people if you're careful not to hurt them. You were not afraid? Sarah paused, considering the question. Of course I was afraid. But fear doesn't change the situation. Those people needed help. We could provide help. So we did. Most species would have waited for military support. Those people would have been dead or enslaved by then. That wasn't acceptable. Creeth studied the human woman. Sarah spoke about boarding a pirate ship the way Creeth spoke about processing housing applications. As if it were simply a task that needed to be completed. As if risking death to save strangers was just part of a normal day. Captain Chun, do all humans think this way? Think what way? That you should act when others are in danger, regardless of the risk to yourself. Sarah looked genuinely puzzled. Well, yes. I mean, that's just basic decency. If you can help someone, you should. Doesn't everyone think that? No, Creeth said quietly. No, they do not. After Sarah left, Creeth sat in her office for a long time, looking at the notes in her log. Humans who lived in darkness. Humans who worked through toxic exposure. Humans who charged into danger to save strangers without hesitation or thought for their own safety. And the most disturbing thing was that they did not think any of it was unusual. They seemed confused when other species expressed amazement or fear. They genuinely believed this was normal behavior that any decent being would exhibit. Creeth opened a new file in her personal log. She marked it as classified and began to type. Humans are not integrating into Confederacy society, she wrote. They are revealing that Confederacy society is not prepared for humans. They do not follow our assumptions about acceptable risk or rational self-preservation. They help others even when helping puts them in danger. They complete tasks even when continuing causes them harm. They solve problems with violence when necessary, but they do not seem to enjoy the violence. They weep over casualties while simultaneously charging toward danger. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I do not believe humans are malicious. I believe they are genuinely kind and wish to help others. But their kindness is aggressive in a way I have never encountered. They save people whether those people want to be saved or not. They solve problems whether they have permission or not. They are helpful, generous, and brave. And I find all of these qualities absolutely terrifying because humans possess them without limits or hesitation. She saved the log and looked out at the station's main concourse. She could see 3 humans down there, working at various jobs, talking with other species, going about their lives. They looked harmless. They looked friendly. But Kreeth had seen the security footage. She knew what they could do when someone needed help. And she wondered what would happen when humanity encountered a problem that could not be solved with cargo, equipment, and determination. She was afraid she would find out soon. The Korthax, Dominion had been a problem for the Galactic Confederacy for 3 generations. They were a militaristic empire that raided border worlds and took slaves. The Confederacy had tried sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and economic incentives. Nothing worked. The Korthax continued their raids, and the Confederacy accepted that some losses were inevitable. War was the failure of civilization, after all. Violence should only be used as an absolute last resort. Then the Korthax raided New Kyoto. New Kyoto was a human colony world, settled only 5 years earlier. It had 50,000 residents, mostly farmers and engineers building a new society on a planet with purple skies and 3 moons. The Korthax attack came at night. They disabled the colony's communications, stunned the residents with neural disruptors, and loaded 3,000 humans onto their slave ships. The Confederacy Council convened immediately. They began drafting sanctions. They prepared diplomatic protests. They scheduled negotiations for the release of prisoners over the next 10 to 15 years. It was the standard protocol, the civilized response. Humanity's response was 4 words that echoed through every Confederacy channel. Give them back. Now. Ambassador Threnix, a Vrenlex diplomat with 40 years of experience, tried to explain the situation to the human delegation. "We understand your anger," he said, his tentacles forming soothing patterns. "But these matters take time. We must work through proper channels. The Korthax will not respond to threats. Diplomacy requires patience." The human ambassador, a man named David Park, stared at Threnix with eyes that seemed to hold barely controlled emotion. "They took our people. 3,000 human beings are being sold as slaves right now. We don't have time for patience. What do you propose?" "We're going to go get them back." "You mean you will join our diplomatic efforts?" "No, I mean we're going to war." The word hung in the air like a curse. The other council members recoiled. War was not something civilized species engaged in. War was barbaric, primitive, a failure of intelligence and reason. "You cannot be serious," Threnix said. "War is an absolute last resort. It should only be considered when your entire species faces extinction. Our people are slaves. To us, this is extinction. This is the last resort." The Confederacy Council voted to censure humanity for warmongering. Threnix hoped the vote would bring the humans to their senses. It did not. Humanity declared war on the Korthax Dominion and began mobilizing their fleet. Threnix requested permission to embed with the human military as an observer. The council agreed, hoping he could document humanity's failure and use it as a lesson about the foolishness of violence. Threnix traveled to the human fleet's staging area and boarded the warship, Unwavering Justice. The ship's captain was a woman named Admiral Lisa Okonkwo. She was tall and dark-skinned, with gray hair and eyes that had seen difficult things. She welcomed Threnix aboard with polite courtesy. "I am here to observe," Threnix said. "The council hopes I can encourage a peaceful resolution." "I hope so too," Admiral Okonkwo said. "But the Korthax have had their chance for peace. Now they get war. Thrinix watched as the human fleet departed. 43 warships, retrofitted from cargo haulers and mining vessels and colony ships. Humanity had been in space for less than a decade. They had no dedicated military vessels. But they had taken what they had and turned it into weapons. The first engagement came at the Korthax border station. Confederacy military doctrine called for limited strikes against military targets, with careful avoidance of civilian casualties. Humanity's approach was different. They broadcast a message on all frequencies in the Korthax language. Admiral Okonkwo's voice was calm and clear as she spoke. This is the human fleet. You have taken 3,000 human beings as slaves. We want them back. We will disable your military capabilities and cripple your economy until you return our people. We do not wish to harm civilians. We are broadcasting the locations of civilian shelters on your station. You have 2 hours to evacuate. Anyone remaining after that time is considered a combatant. Thrinix was stunned. You are warning them? You are giving them time to prepare? We're not monsters, Admiral Okonkwo said. We don't want to kill civilians. But we will destroy anything that helps them keep our people enslaved. 2 hours later, the human fleet attacked. They moved with coordinated precision that shocked Thrinix. These were not trained warriors. They were cargo pilots and miners and engineers. But they fought like they had been preparing for this their entire lives. They destroyed the station's weapons. They disabled its engines. They crippled its communication arrays. And then they broadcasted another message, this time to the civilian population. You are not our enemy. Your government is our enemy. Anyone who wishes to leave the Korthax Dominion will be given safe passage to neutral space. We will provide transport and supplies. You do not have to live under a regime that enslaves others. Over the next week, 30,000 Korthax civilians defected. They came to the human ships, afraid and uncertain, and the humans welcomed them. They gave them food and medicine. They treated the sick and injured. And then they helped them reach Confederacy space where they could start new lives. Thrinix could not understand it. The humans were waging war and offering compassion simultaneously. They destroyed military targets with ruthless efficiency, then wept over the casualties and saved enemy wounded. They were fighting like they wanted to end the Korthax Dominion's ability to make war, but they did not seem to hate the Korthax people. He said this to Admiral Okonkwo one night in her office. She looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes. She had been awake for 30 hours, coordinating attacks and rescue operations. We don't hate them, she said quietly. We hate what they're doing. We hate slavery. We hate cruelty. But the people? Most of them are just trying to survive under a bad government. They didn't choose this, but you are killing their soldiers. Yes, her voice was heavy, and every death weighs on me. But their soldiers are keeping our people in chains. So we'll keep fighting until our people come home. How can you hold both things in your mind? Compassion and violence? Admiral Okonkwo smiled sadly. Because we have to. Because the alternative is to become monsters ourselves, and we won't do that. We'll fight when we must. We'll kill when we have no choice. But we'll never stop seeing the people we're fighting as people. The war lasted 4 months. 4 months of human ships striking military bases, economic centers, and slave markets. 4 months of broadcasts offering defection and asylum. 4 months of surgical strikes that destroyed the Korthax Dominion's ability to wage war without devastating their civilian population. In the end, the Korthax leadership sued for peace. They agreed to release all prisoners, dismantle their slave infrastructure, and allow Confederacy oversight of their government. They had no choice. Humanity had systematically destroyed everything that made their empire function. The 3,000 humans were recovered. Most were physically unharmed but psychologically traumatized. The human fleet stayed in orbit for 2 additional weeks, providing medical care and counseling before bringing their people home. Threenix returned to the Confederacy Council and delivered his report. The council members sat in shocked silence as he described what he had witnessed. "They fought a war in 4 months that we believed would take decades," Threenix said. "They won decisively, and then they just went home. They did not demand territory. They did not insist on reparations beyond the return of their people. They destroyed the Korthax military and economy, rescued 30,000 defectors, and left, as if they had simply completed a task that needed doing. Are they not celebrating their victory?" One council member asked. "No, they are mourning their casualties and helping the survivors heal. They do not glory in what they did. They seem to view the entire war as a tragedy that should not have been necessary. But they are the most effective military force we have ever encountered." "Yes," Threenix said. "And that is what terrifies me, because they do not seek violence. They do not want to fight. But when they decide something must be done, they become inevitable. They will not stop, they will not slow down, and they will not accept failure. They fight with compassion in their hearts and weapons in their hands, and I do not know which is more dangerous." He paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives of 847 species. The humans returned to their worlds and resumed their normal lives. They went back to farming and building and mining, as if they did not just prove themselves capable of dismantling an empire in a single season. And the most terrifying part is that they still do not understand why we are frightened of them. They think they did what any decent species would do. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, one member spoke. "What do we do about humanity?" Threenix's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. "I do not know, but we must decide quickly. Because if humanity ever stops being confused about why we fear them, if they ever truly understand what they are capable of, the galaxy will have to choose whether we are their partners or their prey." The council took no action. They could not decide what to do about a species that made war with compassion and peace with strength. So they did nothing and hoped that humanity would remain the kind monsters who did not know they were monsters. 2 years after the Korthax War, Dr. Sarah Chun noticed something wrong. She was a xenopsychologist, specializing in cross-species communication and cultural integration. Her job was to help humans understand alien species and help alien species understand humans. Lately, the second part had become nearly impossible. Humans were being quietly isolated. Applications for scientific expeditions were rejected without explanation. Invitations to cultural exchanges disappeared. Trade negotiations took twice as long as they should. Other species were polite, but distant. They smiled and made appropriate gestures, but they kept their distance. Sarah had tried to ignore it. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe it was just coincidence. But after 2 years of careful observation, she could not deny the pattern. The galaxy was afraid of humanity, and no one would tell her why. She requested a meeting with Ambassador Threenix. He had observed the human fleet during the war. He had written reports that Sarah had read, reports that praised human effectiveness while expressing concerns she did not understand. If anyone would tell her the truth, it would be him. They met in a neutral location, a small cafe on Nexus Prime. Threenix arrived with his tentacles in cautious patterns. And Sarah knew this conversation would not be easy. "Ambassador," she said, skipping the pleasantries, "why is the galaxy isolating humanity?" Threenix was silent for a long moment. His tentacles shifted through several emotional states before settling on something that looked like resignation. "Because you are terrifying," he said finally. Sarah blinked. "We're terrifying." "Yes, but we've been nothing but helpful. We saved hostages from pirates. We ended the Korthax slave trade. We assist with disasters and share our technology and try to be good members of the Confederacy. How is that terrifying? Threnix's tentacles formed a pattern that Sarah's translator interpreted as deep sadness. Dr. Chun, may I show you something? I have files that were classified, but I believe you need to see them. He pulled out a data tablet and activated it. Files appeared on the screen: scientific reports and analysis documents. Sarah began to read. The first file was about human evolution. It detailed how humans had evolved as persistence hunters, chasing prey across vast distances until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Most predator species in the galaxy were ambush hunters or pack hunters who killed quickly. Humans were the only known species that hunted by never stopping. The second file was about human throwing ability. Humans could throw objects with accuracy and force that no other species could match. Their shoulders, their eyes, their brains were designed specifically for calculating trajectories and hurling projectiles at targets. Throwing was a uniquely human skill, and it was a skill designed for killing at range. The third file was about human endurance. Humans could run for hours. They could work for days. They could survive injuries that would kill other species and keep functioning through pain that would drive others unconscious. Their bodies were built for persistence, for continuing long after others would stop. Sarah read through file after file. Each one detailed another aspect of human biology and psychology that other species found disturbing. Humans domesticated predators. Humans bonded intensely with their groups while being capable of surviving alone. Humans had a fight-or-flight response that included a third option most species lacked: fight harder. Humans felt compassion for strangers and would risk death to save them. The final file was about human cultural evolution. Every human child grew up learning about warfare, even in times of peace. They learned strategy through games. They learned combat through sports. They learned history that was filled with conflict and violence. Humans passed down tactical knowledge through generations, not through genetics, but through teaching and stories. Sarah looked up from the tablet. Her hands were shaking. "This is how you see us? This is what you are," Threnix said gently. "You are apex predators who evolved to chase prey until it died of exhaustion. You are throwers, capable of killing at a distance with terrifying accuracy. You are endurance specialists who do not stop when other species would give up. You domesticate dangerous animals and make them love you. You form intense social bonds while being individually capable of survival. And you teach every generation how to fight, how to persist, how to overcome impossible obstacles." "But we're peaceful," Sarah said. "We don't want to hurt people." "I know," Threnix said. "And that is what makes you most terrifying of all." Sarah stared at him, not understanding. Threnix's tentacles formed patterns of patient explanation. "You think you are normal. You think your compassion, your persistence, your willingness to help others, even at cost to yourself. These are ordinary traits that any species would have. But they are not. They are the traits of a predator species that evolved to never give up. Your compassion is aggressive. Your kindness is relentless. You help people whether they want to be helped or not. You solve problems whether you have permission or not. But those are good things. Yes, they are wonderful things. They are the best things. But Dr. Chun, they are wonderful things wrapped around the psychology of a hunter that never stops. You jumped into plasma to save a child. You charged into a pirate ship with cargo equipment. You went to war for 3,000 people and dismantled an empire in 4 months. And you think all of this is normal. You think any decent species would do the same." Sarah sat back in her chair, trying to process this. "You're saying we're dangerous because we're helpful? I am saying you are dangerous because you are helpful without limits. Because you do not know when to stop. Because you see a problem and decide to fix it, regardless of the cost to yourself. Most species have instincts for self-preservation that prevent them from taking extreme risks. You have those instincts too, but you can override them. You can decide that something is more important than your own safety, and then you act on that decision without hesitation. Threnix leaned forward, his tentacles forming shapes of earnest intensity. The Korthax Dominion existed for 3 generations. They raided and enslaved and caused suffering. The Confederacy accepted this. We negotiated and sanctioned and tried diplomatic solutions. We believed that war should only be fought when your species faced extinction. But you went to war for 3,000 people. You decided that 3,000 people being enslaved was unacceptable, and you ended an empire to save them. Yes, Sarah said, because it was unacceptable. We couldn't just leave them there. But that is what every other species would have done. We would have tried to negotiate their release over many years. We would have accepted that some losses are inevitable. We would have been sad about it, but we would have moved on. You could not move on. You went and got them back. With violence and compassion and relentless determination. Sarah was quiet for a long time, looking at the files on the tablet. She was seeing humanity through alien eyes for the first time, and the picture was deeply unsettling. What do you want us to do? She asked finally. Threnix's tentacles formed a pattern that looked like relief. That is what terrifies us most. A true predator species would use this information to dominate. They would realize their power and use it to control others. But you are asking what we want. You are worried about how we feel. Even now, learning that you are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, your first thought is to make us comfortable. He stood up, preparing to leave. We do not fear what you are, Dr. Chun. We fear what you might become if you stop being confused about why we are frightened. The day humanity understands its own nature and embraces it, that is the day the galaxy will need to decide if we are your partners or your prey. Sarah sat alone in the cafe for a long time after Threnix left. She looked at her own hands, hands that could build and heal and create. Hands that could also throw projectiles with lethal accuracy. Hands that belonged to a persistence hunter, an apex predator, a species that had chased prey across continents until it collapsed. She thought about the plasma coolant incident, about Sarah Chun boarding a pirate ship, about Admiral Okonkwo waging war with tears in her eyes, about humanity's refusal to accept limits or defeat or suffering that could be prevented. She had always thought of humans as the underdogs, the newcomers, the species trying to find their place in a vast galaxy. She had never considered that they might be the monsters. Kind monsters, compassionate monsters, but monsters nonetheless. That night, she wrote in her personal journal. Not a scientific report or an official document. Just her own thoughts, written for herself. We need to make sure we remain the monsters who don't know they're monsters, she wrote. Because the alternative is becoming the monsters who do. The galaxy is afraid of us, and maybe they should be. We are persistence hunters who never stop. We are throwers who kill at a distance. We are endurance specialists who ignore pain and injury to complete our tasks. We are social predators who bond intensely with our groups while being capable of surviving alone. She paused, thinking about everything Threnix had told her, about everything the files had revealed, about the truth of what humanity was. But we are also the species that jumps into plasma to save children, that charges into danger to rescue strangers, that goes to war to end slavery and weeps over every casualty. We are predators with compassion, hunters with kindness, monsters with morality. She wrote one final line before closing the journal. The galaxy fears what we might become if we understand our own nature. So we must never forget that our strength is meant for protecting, not dominating. Our persistence is meant for helping, not conquering. Our refusal to accept defeat is meant for saving lives, not ending them. We are the monsters who don't know they're monsters. And that is exactly what we need to remain. Sarah closed the journal and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were billions of humans, all of them going about their lives, all of them unaware that they were the most dangerous species in known space. All of them thinking they were ordinary, unremarkable, just trying to do their best. And maybe that was good. Maybe the galaxy needed humans to remain confused about their own nature. Maybe the universe was safer when the apex predators thought they were prey. When the monsters believed they were ordinary. When the most dangerous species in the galaxy was too busy helping others to realize how terrifying they truly were. Sarah decided she would not share what she had learned. She would not write papers or give speeches about humanity's true nature. She would let humans remain confused, remain kind, remain the monsters who did not know they were monsters. Because the alternative was too frightening to consider, even for someone who had just learned that her entire species was built for persistence, hunting, and throwing projectiles, and never, ever giving up. The galaxy was afraid of humanity. And now Sarah understood why. And she was determined to make sure they never needed to be more afraid than they already were.